approval. 2002. That
Hey,
one
good
year,
evening.
that's when I moved here.
Thanks for coming.
It was a 1 year extension. We need to sign it.
No, this is just if you want to hear from us for future events. Otherwise, please feel free to get comfortable. We're just about to start.
Yeah. I know Ronnie Musetti was in kindergarten. Yes, I got to know a lot of kids and they know all the textbooks. And you remember that's great. It was, they were only construction, so it was really memorable.
All right, folks, we're about to get started. Let's find your seats. All right. So thank you for coming. Welcome. My name's Zachary. I'm a librarian here in Northeast Harbor. The library is able to offer free programs like this year-round, thanks to our donors, and then also thanks to our vibrant creative community of artists and performers. Coming up in 2 days, on Friday, October 18th, we're hosting the Harvest Moon Poets Gathering. Local writers will share original work and favorites from other authors. So to hear more about that and all of our upcoming programs, please sign up for our e-newsletter. There's a sign-up sheet at the table by the door. So tonight's presenter holds a master's degree from the New York Academy of Art and has studied painting at the National Academy of Design. She's been the artist in residence at Acadia National Park and since 2002 has resided full-time in Maine, where she maintains her studio and teaches, also teaching workshops in Austin, New York, Italy, and France. In 2007, she was awarded the commission to paint the Maine labor mural, which took a full year to complete. And we are lucky enough to have her work on the walls around you and for sale. So please enjoy that after the lecture. Please welcome Judy Taylor.
Hi, thanks for coming. So I just got off teaching a 4-day workshop, which was a very intense 4 days. I had 4 models, 13 students had come in. I had 2 models upstairs and 2 models downstairs in the studio, and we worked solidly for 4 days every day. So I have put together this, so please bear with me if I don't have the name of a certain painter that I'm showing, or so I'm basically, it's kind of cool because I just use models and I use models a lot. So I'm trained as a figurative painter, basically. And that's what I went to New York to study. I had been in Chicago and a man named Harvey Dinnerstein had come in. I don't know if you know Harvey's work. He died a few years ago, but he's an extraordinary figurative painter. And he had come to Chicago to teach for a week. And after my experience of working with him, I moved to New York City for 8 years and studied, and then eventually found my way up here. So I have a studio in Seal Cove, and my studio is about 3 times the size of my house. So I accommodated to use it for models and teaching and just things on display. So I'm kind of going to talk about, like, it's kind of going to be loose, and if you have any questions, just let me know. But I'm going to talk about using the figure in landscapes to show you some of my work, what I look for in a model. And can you see this clearly enough? So this is Thomas Eakins, of course. So Eakins, you probably know the story of Eakins, taught at the, in Philadelphia at the Academy of, what is it? Well, anyway. Yeah, and he taught anatomy, and these are, and of course he got fired for unveiling, one of the women's class, models were required to wear loincloths, and he wanted to show an anatomical connection on the leg to the students who were very, very as curious as anybody to learn about the anatomy so that they could render the figure correctly. And he got one person complained, went to a big thing, and he got fired, which kind of really just destroyed him in the big, it was just very, very heartbreaking. Anyway, these are a number of his students that he would take out and they would go, this is Eakins right here. And so he would do multiple figure paintings, he used his own students and they were all, many of them came on to be great painters in their own right, but they were all game for this because this is what they were interested in doing. This is what they're interested in studying. And they're interested in rendering the figure because it is such a challenge. So to learn the anatomy and the way that the figure works is interesting to all of them. So this is the painting that I just saw in London when I was there last year. It's an enormous painting, and I just love it. I wonder if we could dim the lights a little bit, Zach, or is it because of Zoom?
So this is unfortunately as low as it'll go.
Okay, that's fine.
You can increase the brightness on the screen if you would.
No, it's okay. This painting is just so profound that I just wanted you to see it really clearly. It's bigger than this. It's about as big as this wall, but it's a group of, well, you can see what it is. It's, they're moving, but you can see the arrangement of the figures, that it's not only the figures, but also the incredible perspective of the painting, cast shadows. And anyway, I just love that painting. So I knew somebody was going to ask me about that. I don't have it in my head right now, but down in the d'Orsay Museum, if you go up the top floor of the d'Orsay Museum, it's a lot of the Impressionists and work. And if you go to the bottom floors, these are incredibly large paintings down there on the bottom floor. So I take a group to London and Paris to draw in late February, early March, and we draw in all the museums for about 8 days. So this is one that we would work on. They provide you with stools, you bring your materials in, and we draw for about 4 hours there. So I know that has nothing to do with the question that you asked me, but so using models, so you would use, perhaps you would use models for something that you have witnessed or some kind of time in history. And then you would gather your models together and recreate that scene. At this point, there's probably not much photography. And Eakins, and this is probably around Eakins' time, Eakins used photography, but also this is the skill of the artist doing sketches and recreating the scene that they saw. So this is Velasquez. So Velasquez painted a lot of the people in the court. He was kind of the major domo of Philip IV's household, which meant that he was in charge of hiring. He ran the household, and he's the artist, the king's artist. So this is one of the philosophers. He did I think this might be Aesop, I can't quite remember, but he would paint people in the court and people that were in the household, and he would costume them or whatever and paint them. So Velasquez painted entirely from life. And if you look at his early paintings of Philip IV and then his latest paintings, his last paintings of Philip, you can see an extraordinary development in his ability to render a portrait that looks like it could talk. So anyway, one of my favorite artists. So then there's George Bellows, who witnesses scenes of boxing, sat in unboxing exhibitions. So he painted a number of boxers. George Bellows is familiar to some Mainers. He lived in Monhegan for a while, but he was from New York City. So this is during the Ashcan School where they were really interested in working from life. So again, it's a scene that he witnessed, and then he probably got models together, particularly for the boxer in the front, and created this scene and painted it. Here's another Bellows. This is also you can paint your colleagues or friends. I've painted, these two paintings on the wall over there, a painter friend of mine named Sherr Doting, that's on the left. Sherr and I studied together in New York City, and we were co-monitors of classes at the National Academy. So when we stopped our studies, we formed an atelier and we painted each other. So that's my painting of Sherr on the left, and that's his painting of me on the right. So that's how we kept up our practice. So here, this is a homage to Delacroix. That's Delacroix. I can tell you that's Manet. That is Toulouse-Lautrec. That's Whistler. And I could, Pantin Latour is the one that painted it, and he is, probably has a pencil or a pen in his hand. But Edward Manet is in it, Charles Baudelaire. So these, Bouguereau, it's not Bouguereau, never mind. These are, this is, Delacroix was, like before the Impressionists, but all these guys look to Delacroix for, he was kind of revered. And there's a Delacroix museum in Paris that it's really fun to see because it's his studio in his house. So this is Pantin Latour gathering up his artist friends for a homage to paint them together. Now, in my opinion, they didn't all pose like this, right? He slotted them in because I can see some oddities in perspective and everything, like they weren't really sitting all together. But this is a common way to use models. So to your friends in a, a tribute. There's the names of the players. So this, has ever seen this painting before? It's the Barge Haulers of the Volga by Repin, who is a Russian painter. And the Russian painters before the revolution took the figure and they brought it down to earth, and they painted real life. And it was, there was, that time in Russia, there were some great painters, incredible painters. This is a very large painting. So it depicts a scene that was very common. This is how they would haul in boats. Pretty much slave labor. There's a closer look of that. And you can see the models are all different, characters, and they're all positioned in different places that they can carry their weight. And they would haul these enormous boats up onto the beach, and they were conscripted labor. It's a very emotional painting. And if there it is, a photograph of the actual barge haulers. I don't think Repin used this, but you get the idea of how that was pretty hard life. This is, of course, Deposition by Caravaggio. So how do you get the models for this? Well, if you believe that Christ is a white man, you get him a model, a fit model, and then all these other people are models too. This woman is in many of Caravaggio's paintings. So, and also this guy too. And Caravaggio was also friends with Orazio Gentileschi, which you might know his daughter, Artemisia Gentileschi. And there's a letter or some kind of note that Orazio had sent to Caravaggio saying, I need some wings. You got some wings hanging around? I mean, he didn't use the words, but angel wings, because Caravaggio had a pair, and then Orazio needed them for some giant fresco, and so he borrowed the wings, which is what we do today. We borrow costumes, we borrow models, we borrow, it's just an interchange. So I think that's pretty interesting. And you use a lot of the same models too, your colleagues in there's not that many figurative painters on the island, but certainly well, first of all, I get my models through all my contacts and from all the places that we go. And I'll talk about that a little later because I have some pictures from my recent workshop and the extraordinary models that I had. So another Caravaggio painting, the Supper Emmaus. This is right at the moment where Christ reveals himself. He stops in a tavern and he had come across these two men traveling on a path to a tavern to stay the night, and they all sit down for a feast. That's the innkeeper. And at this moment, Christ decides to tell them who he is. So it's a very interesting, so they're all like in shock. This is what makes Caravaggio so great beyond his painting skills, to depict that absolute moment when Christ reveals himself and the drama. So Caravaggio, again, is setting up his models, and you can see the man that plays Christ is this could be that other guy, you know, I think plays St. John the Baptist in one of his paintings. So using the same model, setting up the still life. Another Caravaggio called the card charts, so when I was in training, I copied this painting to just learn how Caravaggio painted. And that was like, it's a great exercise if you want to know how somebody did it, you know, especially with a painting, you just study it, you know, so it took, you know, worked for about a month. But this is just at the moment, you know, this young dandy is being ripped off by this guy who's he's looking over and showing the card. He has no idea what's going on. And this one's, you know, he's pulling his cards out. So you can see a couple things. Little gloves, things like fingernails, there might be some dirt underneath the fingernails. All these kinds of things depict what class the certain models are coming from. So that is the card charts. I have so many paintings to go through, so if you have any questions, just raise your hand. This is another famous Russian painter. I don't have the name in front of me, but this is at the moment when a man returns from the war, from the Russian Revolution, and or the Crimean War. I'm not really sure, but you can see that he's haggard, and his wife or his daughter, I can't know for sure, is jumping up to see him. Nobody expected him to come home. So another moment in time that's captured by the artist who arranges the models to increase the drama and the narrative. So I'm going to go into kind of what do I look for in a model? Like, I know there's something called the direct gaze, and that is when the model is looking right back at the viewer, and I find that the most interesting thing. So I'm going to show you some paintings this is a Sargent, that I think are beautiful, that have that direct gaze. What that does is it pulls the viewer into a relationship with the model. And I notice a lot with today, a lot of them aren't using the direct gaze. A lot of figurative painters are not using the direct gaze, and I'm not quite sure why that is, but it evokes a different feeling. Oh, that's my copy of the Caravaggio. Okay, I'm skipping. So, you know, women have been neglected in figurative art because, first of all, they were not allowed to study the male figure or the female figure in the nude until like Repin in the 1800s, late 1800s, opened up a studio in Russia that allowed women to come in, or like Artemisia Gentileschi, she learned from her father. And that's how you learned if you were a woman, if you had the chance, which is why you see a lot of beautiful still lifes and genre scene, you know, beautiful still lifes done by women at those times, because that's what they were relegated to. But during the war, World War II, World War I and World War II, women were conscripted to, or were asked to come into hospitals and to document what was going on in the hospitals during World War I and II. And this is a female painter that I saw at the war rooms in London. Do you know the war rooms, Churchill's war rooms? Anyway, it has incredible paintings that I've never seen before. But I love the composition. You can see that now we're getting into a more modern look, even though that's in 1917 maybe. So I'm going to jump to this. Like I said, they're jumped around. Why do I like this painting? Because it's so sensitive with the hands. So that's another thing, that when I set up a model or set up a thing, I believe the hands and the face, the hands are just as much about the model and the narrative as the faces. So I find, and this is a very tender, a little girl. I'm not sure if the sparrow is dead or she's trying to revive it. But anyway, that's just, and it's a moment in time, just that little, the gesture that she's doing captures a moment. It's not like just resting. It's a movement, something's in motion there. It's another painting that I saw, these are all pretty much from last year's London trip. So the painter decided to pose her pulling up her stocking. And I asked the models to do the same thing. I don't want them just sitting there without some action. So I would like to have the hands involved in the painting usually. So I asked them to maybe do something that they can actually hold for a long time. And I had all these great young models lately and they're going, oh, no problem. I can hold this for 4 hours. They were on the floor dying, stretching, during the breaks, because it is physical to hold that pose for a long time. But anyway, I think this is a beautiful painting. And the other thing about a good painting, the painter moves your eye around the canvas. So you're always, they comfortably can move your eye around the canvas so that you know if something's compositionally questionable, it's because you're stopped or you're falling off the canvas. That makes sense. So I threw this guy in because I was sitting in the National Portrait Gallery with my students last year. And another benefit of sitting there and drawing is you get these guides that come along bringing a group, right? Or a couple people, and they start talking about a painting and you're sitting there and you get to listen in on all this. So this guide is talking about this painting. And he says this, I do have the name, this is, I don't know. Well, anyway, I'll tell you. But anyway, obviously he's a war hero. So it says, well, when he was so-and-so, he went into the war and then he had to leave because he got his eye shot off. So he went home and this is kind of how the guy is portraying it, and he's telling a story and goes on, and then he decided to go back. And at that point, he had 2 legs shot. And then the guy went back to war like 8 times. 9 times. So anyway, by the end of this guy's lecture, you couldn't believe that this guy just kept returning to war, but this is who he is. He served in the Boer War, the First World War, and Second World War. He was shot in the face, head, stomach, ankle, leg, hip, and ear, was blinded in his left eye, survived 2 plane crashes, tunneled out of a prisoner of war camp, and tore off his own fingers when a doctor declined to amputate them. Describing his experiences in the First World War, he wrote, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war." So you're sitting there and you're going, okay, this guy's done, but he kept going. And then he went back and then he was in a plane crash. And anyway, this is by a woman artist of a little girl. Actually, the story was she was supposed to be, getting penicillin, but they did pose this but it was right when penicillin was developed and they wanted to encourage people to do it. So they had a painter come in and paint this girl receiving penicillin. And this artist is Nora Nielsen Gray. Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, anyway, this is her painting of a hospital in Brussels or London, I can't remember. But I love the use of the models and I love the use of the red that brings you right up to the front of the painting. Okay. This is another, okay, I'm gonna go back. Nope. Okay, Zach, how do I get back to? I'm going the wrong way. Can I just go back a couple?
Yeah.
There, that's good, thank you. Okay. This is another painting by a woman, showing that a nurse giving a light to a cigarette, lighting a soldier's cigarette. So again, painters are coming in to document history. And now a lot of things are documented by photographs, and they were documented certainly during those times by photographs, but a lot of painters came in to document these kinds of things. And like during the World War II or before World War II, during the WPA, our government hired painters and artists and writers and theatrical people to document our history, which in some people call it our American Renaissance, because we were hiring artists and we were paying artists to produce work. And some of the best writing and some of the greatest paintings comes out of our experience of it in the 30s, late 30s. Okay, when I was studying, we were all told this is, and I agree with it, this is the greatest portrait ever painted. This is Diego Velasquez, and this is his manservant, who was a slave. So, and also a very good painter in his own right. So he had a good relationship with Velasquez, and Velasquez used him as a model. So another relationship. This is a sergeant, of course. And I'm going back to the direct gaze here, engaging the viewer. These are all what I considered to be, this is another sergeant, it's freely painted, but it's also, I wouldn't say it's direct gaze, it's a little bit off to the side, but you're engaged with the viewer. And this sergeant, I don't know if anybody saw the sergeant show at the Museum of Fine Arts last year, but it also traveled over to London to the Tate Britain. And this was at the Tate Britain, and I had never seen this sergeant portrait before because it's in a private collection. And thankfully, they lent it to the show because it's the most extraordinary portrait by sergeant I have ever seen. And it was just a real treat to see it. And it's not even, this photo, it doesn't even do it justice. It's just incredibly beautiful. And then I just do, sometimes I'll take the photo and throw it on my phone to get it black and white so I can see the values and the shadow tones, especially when I'm teaching. So here is Manet, Manet painting. This is Berthe Morisot. Again, the artist painting another painter. And they had a very close relationship. So there you go. He painted Berthe Morisot quite a bit. This was a sergeant, this was a commemorative piece, and she was a school teacher, or no, she was a head of a school. But I love the way that a hand is placed on, when I was talking about using the hands in the face, the hand is placed on her, by the side of her face. It, first of all, gives you a little bit of an idea of her personality, and but then you get to paint that beautiful glowing shadow inside the hand that kind of mimics the face and the incredible blacks that Sargent could get. This is another painting that was in London, that also the direct gaze, use of the hands, using the model's hand in some form against the face. You know, it just increases the gesture, the direct gaze looking out. And that's the color version. And we sketched that in London. And as we were sketching that, there was you see a lot of school groups, and in this, particularly in the Tate, this was in the Dorsey, you see older kids, like teenage kids and junior high school kids. So there was a group of about 6 young, 14-year-olds with their teacher. And one of them just said, when she saw us sitting there drawing, and she said to her teacher, "I'm staying here." And she sat down next to us, and her teacher said, "Okay, I'll be back for you in 2 hours." And she drew with us quietly for 2 hours. And so you get this kind of, when you're over there drawing, you get people, there's kind of a tribe. You see people from all different countries that are sitting there drawing also. And there's just this kind of a cool communication between, okay, this is pretty fun. Another beautiful portrait. The hands. Again, the hands. So recently, if you have ever been to the Hispanic Society in New York City, because if you haven't, it's reopened and it's well worth a visit. So it's up in 125th, and it was closed. It was closed for COVID, and right after COVID, it was closed for a 3-year renovation, which took about 5. It is now reopened, but they have what's called a giant room. It's I would say maybe a little bit bigger than this room, really high ceilings, and it's filled with Joaquin Sorolla murals. And these murals depict every different area of Spain. And Sorolla is a wonderful painter, of the time of Sargent. So he's a fantastic painter. He has been little known in the United States, but he's getting to be very well known. So Sorolla was commissioned by the owner of the museum, Huntington, to come over and create these murals of different regions of Spain. So again, documenting certain things in like, for instance, all regional areas of Spain. So here's some, like, I don't have the names of where these regions are exactly, but obviously this is where they're harvesting fish. And these are enormous and beautifully painted. More agricultural. It's a ceremony of, a religious procession. These are just, you've got to go there. You've got to see it.
What's the name of the museum?
Hispanic Society. It's up in, it's an incredible place. Another region of Spain. I mean, I can't even believe he did all this work, plus all the huge amount of work that he did otherwise. So, he's going in, he's taking, and Sorolla and Sargent also had manservants to help them with their paintings, right? And so, like, to help them set up even outdoors, which I thought, that's a really great idea. But so Sorolla, because he would set up these huge canvases, you can see there's pictures of them and they're tied down from the wind and everything like that. And so he would travel to these different areas of Spain and did all this preliminary work to do these paintings. They're all festivals. So he also did this painting, which I love. And this is a polio clinic, way before we had any vaccines for polio. The friars are taking care of the young boys. So Sorolla had, I think, like 6 children. He had some young boys. You can see in some of these, this may be another painting. So here is a recreation of his visit to this place that took care of these boys, and they're going out for a swim. It's a beautiful painting. Manet again. So this is probably one of the last paintings he did in his career, Bar at the Folies Bergère. So this woman, he had probably seen tending bar, or he saw a scene like this, hired the model, used the model, whatever. This is the scene. It makes people crazy, this painting, because they don't really know what's going on with the perspective and everything. But in my opinion, she's tending bar. Back here, there's a reflection of all the people in the theater where she's having a bar, and she's pretty done. She's pretty tired of it all. So sometimes when I see this and I'll see a woman, I saw a young woman at a museum we were at, and she looked just like this woman. So, usually I like to ask before I take somebody's photo, but then they want to pose. So it's kind of a tricky thing. So anyway, but I'll start seeing people that look just like famous paintings. And that's how I pick models too. So, and this is another Sorolla. It's a huge Sorolla. This, I believe, is in his house in Madrid, his studio. It's the Sorolla Museum. And it's like the Delacroix, it's where he worked and he painted, and it's a great thing to visit in North Madrid. Mending the Sails. And then Thomas Eakins, back to Thomas Eakins. This is another depiction of maybe something. So this is probably, I don't know if this was a portrait commission, but this is a very famous painting of a surgery. And Eakins got to really use his knowledge of anatomy and to depict this doctor and all the players in the background. Have you ever been into a medical theater where they all sit above, or watch Seinfeld when he dropped the junior mints into the cadaver? Do you remember that one? Or not cadaver? Anyway, that's kind of like it. But great painting. I think it's the anatomy lesson. But this guy really is interesting. Shying away, and guess he's not going to graduate probably, but all right. And here's Degas. Degas traveled to New Orleans, and this is a cotton mill, a cotton, these are the guys that are in charge of the assessing the cotton, selling the cotton, moving it. This is obviously intrigued Degas very much, has a very Degas style. But I love the movement that he uses. First of all, the movement that he has in his perspective, where the figures are going back in space, but also the use of his whites that carry you right around the painting. So when I say your eye moves, come through around the painting, you're coming up, you're going down, you're pulling over, this guy standing there brings you back up. Your eye is moving very comfortably around the painting. If you took out any of those elements, you might fall off the painting, but he's controlling how you see the painting. This is called the absinthe. You ever had that stuff? I don't think it's very good for you. So obviously a scene in a cafe that he witnessed. Another lovely way to use the direct gaze and show that this woman was interested in this portrait and that she's interested in reading. And it could even be if the type is on the book, something that's personal to her. Here's I'm just going to show you some other, what I think are really interesting portraits that I saw at the National Portrait Gallery that you don't normally see. I mean, that aren't in the public domain so much. I love this one. This is not the direct gaze, but it certainly is, and it has dramatic shadow tones, like Caravaggio, but use of the hands. There's another with the hand on the side. And this is a painting by a Russian painter, and is one of my favorite portraits. The perspective of the artist, we're having a down below perspective. We're seeing her up in her carriage, as the artist had seen her up in her carriage. And with all that beautiful negative space around her and her direct gaze, I think it's really an incredible painting. And this does nothing for the real color of this painting. So another thing to do if you go to New York City is at the Frick collection the Frick Museum is undergoing renovations. So they moved their collection over to the old the old Whitney. And so the Whitney, even though it's called old, it was much more modern than the Frick is. If you've ever been in the Frick, it's like a home. But the Whitney has this huge walls. So the collection from the Frick is now hanging in this modern space, and it is a revelation to see those paintings again in that space. So I would highly recommend, it's probably going to be returning in a year or so. If you go to New York City, go up to the Whitney, the old Whitney, and view that collection. Theodore Roosevelt, painted by Sargent, and the story goes that Sargent could not get an appointment with Teddy Roosevelt to get his portrait painted. And he was at the White House, and Theodore Roosevelt came down the stairs and grabbed the thing, and Sargent said, "Hold it." And that's the story that I heard. And Theodore Roosevelt was game, and then Sargent painted him. So it sounds a little, but it also sounds appropriate to their personalities. This is a Toulouse-Lautrec self-portrait, so that's another way of training, using yourself as a model. Remember when I talked about Velasquez skill? This is the last painting of Philip IV. It's hanging at the National Gallery in London, and you really are in front of that painting, and you really feel like you could feel his breath on you. That is how skilled it is. It's another painting of two sisters, and I really love the composition. I love the use of the hands. It moves your eye right around. Las Meninas, which is, conceivably the greatest painting ever painted. But this is of course, this is a royal household scene, but Velasquez shakes everything up by his composition. This is the young princess. These are her maids of honor. These are the dwarves that took care of her. This is probably the one that was kind of really in charge of her daily upkeep and everything. Her dog, her nurse back here. This is Olivares, who was the military man and this is Velasquez. And in the mirror is the king and queen being reflected as they're entering the room. The princess died the following year. There's just, but it's in the Prado. And you can see the size, this is not the size of the painting, but this is Velasquez painting it. So he is looking out to you, out to the viewer to say, yeah, I'm the guy. But the composition is absolutely perfect. Here's a little close-up of the princess. This is a painting by Anders Zorn, who is also an amazing painter. There's something called the Zorn palette, which is a limited color palette. It's black, white, cad, red light, and yellow ochre. And you can get this whole range of colors from that mixture. A moment in time, man smoking a cigarette. But what that Zorn palette also gives you is a harmony within the painting. This is another, just with the use of the hands, holding a basket and the gaze and the red scarf. I put this in because I used to work at the Claremont Hotel, and I would see this scene in a different manner all the time. The Claremont had famous for their croquet, and people wore their whites. Anyway, so I think this is a Pissarro paint. I'm not sure. Anyway, also when I was doing the labor mural, I was looking a lot at Manet. So this is a, bullfighter. Manet painted a lot of him, but also he's changing it into a much more modern composition. The figure is realistic, but it's in a very modern, you can trace art right through history, how things start getting into a more contemporary, modern, and then go back again. So this is Manet, and this is Berthe Morisot. Also, it's a big painting. It's really, so again, painting your friends and neighbors. This is a Caravaggio painting that, the mother is, well, obviously, I think it's Saint Anne and maybe the Madonna, they have halos, pulling the the boy away from the snake. And so Caravaggio used, prostitutes, neighbors, everything. And I think I told you he'd shared models with Orazio Gentileschi. But Caravaggio was a fighter. He fought on the streets. If you ever saw the Zeffirelli film Romeo and Juliet, where they're on the streets, that is the life of Caravaggio in my mind, because they'd sword play all over the streets. And actually he killed a man, he had to leave Rome, and it goes on. So that's a self-portrait. It's not Caravaggio. So when I was, this is a painting I did of my niece when she was at Columbia College in Chicago in their dance program, and I went to visit. Like Degas used to go and visit the dance studios and do a lot of paintings. So I visited Caitlin's dance studio, and then again, I modernized the background. This is my niece, Kate, one of my nieces, and I was just telling somebody that I have 11 nieces and nephews, and they've all been in my paintings. So that's a woman that used to, the teacher, of course. So it's a big painting. It's actually on display now at Thomas Moser in Freeport, if you're down there and you want to see the real painting. This is a model that I had a couple years ago, Shelley, and I just put her in a scene in Maine. I was looking at a lot of pre-Raphaelites at the time, so I wanted to hire redheaded models, and she ended up being an absolutely beautiful, graceful model. This is Ong painting, of a nude. So I'm just going to segue into, this is a painting I did of one of my models. Simple. And then, so now I also do portraits. So I've been commissioned to do 3 portraits for Johns Hopkins University. So I don't select the models, but I was very lucky to have Dr. Barton Childs as a model, who was insistent that he didn't want to be in a cloak and gown. He wanted, and this is when he's 92, so he had resisted having his portrait painting for all these years, which is a good thing, because then I was able to paint his portrait, because, it was really fun. So, but during the portrait process, I was, had to work with a committee, and Barton had been teaching already now for 70 years. Nobody had remembered him with a beard. He grew his beard long in his old age, like when he was 90. He just grew it because, you know, the truth is he didn't want to have to worry about getting his dentures in and out. So the committee wanted me to make sure that Barton was depicted when he was younger too. So the only way that I could solve this, and I did this with the labor mural, was to put Barton here at one point and then here at his desk. And when I went in to visit him in his office, he had on his walls everywhere National Geographic pictures of animals, babies, and their mothers. So I included this one, the mothers, in the painting. And up above is his mentor. And then when he was young, he worked in the 30s in the South at a clinic, and these children were being treated for ringworm. So I wanted to incorporate his life without having his hand on a book or, you know, the account. So this is how I did it. And I looked at, well, it doesn't really matter. I looked at a lot of great paintings to get this. This is a fun painting that I did of one of my models, and I wanted to, so Lyndon O'Ryan, she used to live here, and I just decided that it had to have this kind of background of, this was Old Orchard Beach from the 40s in the background. So this is another, I did a bunch of series, and this is called Dorothy. So, because that's Toto, right? It's my take on Dorothy. This is a friend of mine. She's a painter. We studied together, and she would come and visit in Maine. We'd go out painting, and she was such an extraordinary painter and extraordinary model that I posed her down at the in Bass Harbor. You probably recognize that, but. So here are two of the models that I hired just this last week, and I set them up in a double pose upstairs. I let them create the pose, and they just worked very, very well together. And here are some of the students working. It's another, but they were so graceful, and they held this pose for, like I said, 4 days, 4 hours a day. I mean, they got breaks and everything. And this is my other two models that were downstairs posing. I had these model stands built where, so the light would be on the source. And here are some people just working. But I was just so lucky that these models were so extraordinary. And for some reason, I didn't really talk beforehand, but their outfits matched. Like I felt that this was something like out of 1920s Berlin or something when I was looking at it. And the students had great fun working from the model. I've also taken my, I don't work with this model anymore because she's now a scientist, and but we worked together about 10 years. So I took her, you know, I have a photographer friend of mine that would go out in these things. So I borrowed this car from the Seal Cove Auto Museum and went around the island and took pictures. And I did a bunch of little small studies in the event that I might do a larger painting. This was one, this is little tiny studies. This was another, it's just kind of kitschy stuff. This is her with a wig with another model in my studio. And I call this, is it True Blondes Have More Fun? I don't know if you remember the Clairol commercials from way back. That is the Clairol commercial back there. And it's just kind of my inside joke on that. You can see those shoes have reappeared in other paintings. This is a painting that I did also, Beth, in the studio. It's a very large painting. This is a model I had in Willow. She was a COA student. She was just really striking. And this was from a photo shoot. And then I did this painting of her portrait. So anyway, she was really into, she would do these things for children where she dressed up as a mermaid in the park and hid somewhere in the park. And the tour came and they said, can we find the mermaid? And all of a sudden they would find Willow. So I took her out, we took her out in her tail. And this is over at Bartlett's Landing. It's another painting of Willow and an old painting of a bath. And then I also really like the old, you know, like Carol Burnett show and all the old, this is from Greece. beauty school makeup. So I look at like references. I just love the composition. This is one of my models in the bathtub. These are two of my nieces and nephews when they were little that I painted in New York City. And this is them all not grown up. Now they're in college, but this is in their teens. This is another local boy, he's Seal Harbor in New York City, that I painted here down by Thrumpcap. I think he's in the Army now or something. It's the charcoal I did of a drummer from a band called Dopapod when he was here visiting during COVID, came and sat for me. It's a painting. I feel like I'm running out of time and I want to get through these. I don't even know what time is it, Zach.
6:24.
Oh, okay. I had this model in New York City. This is probably 2 weeks we worked on this. And then at the very end, he put this towel on. So I just put it in really quickly. These are some of the models I had during COVID. I worked with a number of, I used to teach at the Austin Museum of Art in Austin, Texas. And one of my former students started an atelier down there, which is now a very fine academy. So during COVID, they hired models to sit for us on the Zoom platform. So the model was moving and there, and we were in present time, and we painted. It was the best we could do. And there were people from, Europe, everybody on there painting together in the same model. So these are just some, and they're all over there. These are about 3-hour paintings. And it was great because I had the benefit of using models that we don't normally see in Maine. Hope we're getting more, thank God, but these are some of the models we had. And this is don't have this painting any longer, but it's a bluffs over in Northeast Harbor, not Northeast Harbor, on Echo Lake. And I was kayaking by and I saw this scene and I wanted to capture that scene. So this is actually from photographs that I took from the kayak. This is a Barton again. So this is Dr. David Valley from Johns Hopkins too. That was the second portrait I did for them. He's a big fan of Darwin, so Darwin's up there. This is a baby Dave had worked on when he was young, a baby that had genetic disorder. This is him writing out when he's talking to a patient, a diagnosis. He's a big birder, a big fan. He's a great photographer. So the loon is up there going over Bass Harbor Marsh. He lives, of course, in Baltimore and up here in the summer. He runs the short course at the Jackson Lab. So he comes up for, anyway, so that's, and this was my last portrait for Hopkins. This is the doctor who led the head of medicine, Mark Anderson, at Johns Hopkins, and he navigated them through COVID. And these are some of his students. And this is, of course, the facade of Johns Hopkins. And this is the first portrait done for the Department of Medicine at Hopkins, where we ditched the tie. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, it was. Three Graces, it's a very famous subject in painting. This was just one painting of the Three Graces. So this is my take on the Three Graces. These are three of my nieces. And I did 2 paintings of them. Included my golden. So they all live in Chicago, but I knew I wanted to paint them, and I knew that they're all very good at they're very creative and getting into a pose. I can use them for anything. So I had done a bunch of looking through things. So I sent them these images and I said, can you just come up with some poses that I can sketch? This is just them having fun. But I said, please all dress in black. So I wanted this harmony. And so they did these and I did send some sketches to them. And so the results are those 2 paintings. This is Lily and Martine. No, Lily and her sister. Martine, not Martine, but anyway, these are two models I had from the island. And they both went to COA. Lily was a student of mine. So I asked them to come sit and they sat live for this painting. Malia, this is one of my more recent models that I used for my workshop, and she had never modeled before, so we did a little photo shoot with my friend, and I just thought that was kind of a beautiful pose. And so these are on the rocks over by Bass Harbor. But then I looked up, and Laura Knight, who was a really also great painter. So this is a subject that the model looking out through the ocean, that could be Acadia. Oh, that's not a very good shot, but that's a commission I just finished for a client that wanted, this is over on Long Pond at Mile Rock. And I just created it from a number of different models that I had. And this is his son Rex. So, and then I'm doing under construction right now, so occasionally I'll get the workers in there because I think, oh, that's kind of interesting, I'll take pictures of them. This is a pose that I model had over by Porcupine Islands. This is a demonstration I did for a class. This is over at Echo Lake. Sorry about the light. Echo Beach. This is one of my first paintings I did when I moved up here. Like I said, I worked at the Claremont. And the chef, this woman chef said, let's go clamming. And we rode over to Greening Island to clam for the day. And these were the two Claremont dogs and they came with us. And it was in the rain, 4 hours. She got a bunch of buckets and I think I got 6 clams. But this is from that, it was New York City gal. This is my take on Moxie. This is actually owned by the granddaughter of the founder of Moxie. I set my model up in the studio so that the legs crossed right at the X. It's my model. This is Beth again, very creative. That's Caitlin again. This is, I don't know if you know the Mary Beth, yoga teacher. Thank you. Mary Beth Murray, who came out to me to Islesford and posed for me out on Islesford. So I call this the wave. It's an old painting. So this is just a part of a portrait commission I did. And the client was really hip to not having anything formal. We went to Back Beach and I took the kids there and we worked it out. Wanted them they're kids that grew up coming to Maine and being out on the beach and just, tide pooling and everything like that. It's another one of my nieces I call this Molly Moon. And actually I hired a model named Molly Moon last year. So this is a Bouguereau. He's can see he's an interesting painter, let's say, just really classical. Yeah. So anyway, and then I did a number of things with my model. This is at Seal Cove Pond. I did a whole series of water scenes, returning water to where we're at. This is all has a kind of alliteration to like taking care of our water and oceans. This is a old painting of my husband's father, who was a fisherman, mending the traps. It's at Thurston's. These guys were this is kind of a little piece of life from way back. You can see the old Coke machine, the wooden traps, his trap, and we call it fish tails. Because they're just probably what they're doing, telling tales. This is when I came here after I did the labor mural. I was really taken with workers in the park, so I did a series of trail workers. This is one of the series, Trail Workers at Rest. This is them, and this is at the Durham Museum in COA, if you want to see it. I got to go fast, man. I'm losing time. This is Sargent's painting of World War I, and it's called Gassed. And it is a huge painting and is at the War Museum in London. It's really extraordinary. soldiers that are going blind. But you see this? I am sure that he was looking at Repin and the barge haulers of the Volga when he did this person, because it's almost the identical, very similar to one of the people in that painting. It's, go see it if you can. So this is the full labor mural when I did the labor mural in 2008. Then there's so when I set to, there was a lot that could be involved with a labor mural, but I needed to bring history in, and I wanted to be the models to come in and engage the viewer. So I worked with a historian named Charlie Secontras. He was like the premier Maine historian. And he told me at one point when we were working together that his family were a bunch of shoemakers. He came from a lineage of shoemakers, and he was a shoemaker also. And then he said to himself one day, is that all there is? And he went back and he's got his doctorate in history. And he said, I decided to save souls instead of repairing souls. He was like Shakespeare. This guy was amazing. So that's Charlie. That's Charlie. And he was such a mentor and a teacher. And this is a young student I had named Josh, who I asked to come in and pose as the young apprentice in this called The Shoemaker. That's the first panel of the labor mural. And this one, these were some students that I had, well, that's my little nephew, but these are some students that I had in Bangor when I was teaching. And I asked them to pose for the child labor. And the background are all things pulled from the newspapers of history, of actual photos of the time. Again, I just hired local models that I had, or you might come in, like when I was working on this, it took me a year to do it. You might come in and I'd say, oh, you're the right face for this. Can you pose for this? And this one is Frances Perkins, and I actually, Miss Buell posed for Frances, and that's my dad when he came from the war. And this is Kate Pickup McMullen when she was pregnant with her daughter, who was Kia, who was 15 now. So I asked Kate to pose for that. Again, these were the carpenters that were building my studio, this guy and this guy. And so this was another student I had depicting a Native American who worked in the woods. And there was a story that a man got felled by a tree, and the Native American man, he was huge, big, tall guy, carried him out like 30 miles. This man was a diehard Republican who was not into the labor mural. He came into my studio and he got very emotional about that his grandparents had been working in the factories. So I asked him, I said, well, Ron, we need to put you in the labor mural. So he ended up being in the labor mural, kind of turned the corner a little bit. This is Lily, the woman from before. This is Lily. I used as a model a number of other models. These two were friends of mine for the women in the textile mills and voting. Oh, that's, so, yeah, we already went through that, I think, yeah. This is the women that went into the, during World War II, into the factories to work. Those are a number of local people that I use for the models. Same with this one. There's that guy again. This is Wayne Davis, who's a fisherman over in Bass Harbor, and I asked Wayne to come in and sit for me, and he was mending his, whatever they do, they make their bait. Thank you, Susan. Bait. So this is Wayne when he was sitting for me. Wayne wasn't the best sitter. He told great stories. This is a little thing I did out on Cranberry Island when I saw the workers leaving the island. This is a painting from that I did from Capri, when these are the grotto boatmen of one of the, all of a sudden this just happened when I was there. So I just wanted to paint him, and that's it. Thanks. Sorry it was so long. Do you have any questions or? Fast and Furious.
I have one question. When, like, you're painting the kids, is that, do you do that from a study or do they actually stand there or sit there for
Well,
long enough?
I would love if they could sit for me. And my little nephew, Patrick, who is, even when he was 4, I think he thought he was a really nice looking guy, and he would sit for me for a half hour. And then I actually took him out to my friend's studio and he sat for a whole hour and a half. For a little guy, that's a lot, but so sometimes that works and I love it. But when I do a portrait commission, it's near impossible, especially if I have three kids together. People are so busy now. So I'll take photos, but I try to use it as with my knowledge of working from life. Yeah. So, thank you so much. Okay.
I think Savoya has not enjoyed the sort of academic fame that some of his contemporaries.
Well, I think Franco, he was like sealed around, during the regime at Franco, nothing was coming out. And then, I don't know. I think museum curators certainly knew about him. Huntington certainly knew about him to bring him over. And then, maybe that kind of art was not in favor at certain times, but he was always very famous in Spain. And now he's becoming really famous also here. And there was a huge retrospective of his work in London 3 years ago. And so he's really one of the best. So hopefully we'll hear more about him. Yeah. So good question. Why? Right? Well, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Zachary.
Just your glasses are.